17 years is a long time to build a life. I remember our first apartment, drafty windows, creaky floors, and a mattress on the ground. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Or at least, I thought we did. By year 10, we had a home with real hardwood floors, a joint bank account, matching SUVs in the driveway, and 2 vacations a year. She had her Pilates classes and book club. I had my accounting firm and a back porch I practically lived on. Everything looked stable, maybe even admirable. But I learned something. Comfort doesn't mean safety, and love doesn't mean loyalty. Before we get too deep, thank you for being here. If this story speaks to you, hit like, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Big shout out to Rusty from Nashville. Your words last week hit deep. Drop your name in the comments if you want a shout out next story. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The first real sign came in winter. She started working late a lot. Claimed they were launching a new campaign at the agency. I believed her. I even packed her little snacks some nights, thinking I was being supportive. When she got home late one night, cheeks flushed from the cold, I offered to pour her a whiskey. She looked at me like I was furniture. "I'm going to shower," she said, and disappeared upstairs. That's when I felt it. Not proof, but a pull in my gut. Something was off. A week later, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while showering. I never touched her phone, never had a reason to. But that night, something in me cracked open. I tapped it. No pascode. Messages. One pinned. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. His name was Brian, a junior executive. I remembered him vaguely. Younger, gelled hair, one of those guys who laughs a little too hard at his own jokes. I scrolled back. Photos. Times, places, restaurant bills I'd paid for. Hotels she swore were team building retreats. She wasn't just cheating. She was gone, checked out of our marriage, using my support as scaffolding for her double life. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, and I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the wood grain. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I opened my laptop instead, and I started planning. The thing about betrayal is that once you see it, you start seeing everything. Every late night, every text she laughed at and quickly tucked away. Every girl's weekend that didn't line up with credit card charges. And you realize you weren't oblivious. You were trusting. You were invested. You chose to believe in a version of the person who no longer existed. That was the part that hit hardest. Not the affair. Not even the lie. It was realizing how long I'd been the only one still showing up for the marriage. I spent nights going back through memories, looking for clues. The way she'd stopped asking about my day. The way she barely reacted when I surprised her with that trip to Napa. I remembered how she used to reach for my hand in the car. That hadn't happened in years. I chalked it up to routine. Fatigue. Kids growing up. But it wasn't that. She'd simply shifted her affections elsewhere and assumed I'd never notice. She was wrong. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I didn't want a screaming match. I wanted clarity. I wanted proof. So I started documenting everything. I logged text messages, emails, her location history. I even installed a legal tracking app on the shared iPad she sometimes used for work travel. Turns out, her work trips weren't quite so professional. One weekend, she told me she was in Phoenix for a strategy retreat. Her location showed she never left the city. She was checked into a boutique hotel 3 miles from her office. I took screenshots. Save them all. I also called a friend of mine, Ben. He's a financial auditor I met at a conference years back. We played poker together a dozen times since. I told him what I'd found, and he didn't flinch. First move, he said, separate your assets. Quietly. You can't afford to look emotional in court. He helped me start the process. We drafted a plan, pull out of our joint investments, freeze her access to discretionary funds, and begin preparing for what might come next. In the meantime, I played my part. Still cooked on Sundays. Still kissed her cheek. Still nodded when she talked about her long days. But now, every word she said rang hollow. One night, she came home late and found me watching TV. She looked tired. Work was brutal, she said. I muted the screen. Looked right at her. I'm sure it was. She paused, unsure of the tone. But I smiled. just enough to keep the peace. Because what she didn't realize was that I was no longer playing defense. I've always been a numbers guy. It's what kept the lights on, paid for college funds, even let her launch that side business she eventually let fall apart. But for the first time, my skill with numbers wasn't about profit. It was about leverage. I wasn't trying to win her back. I was making sure that when the floor gave way, she was the one left scrambling for solid ground. Ben and I went to work. First step, I moved all our joint savings into an account under my name only, perfectly legal, since 90% of it came from my income. Then I had the house appraised. Turns out, she never followed up on adding her name to the deed after our refinance 5 years ago. I never thought much of it back then. Now it felt like fate had given me a gift. I canceled our shared credit cards and replaced them with separate ones. She didn't even notice, probably too busy texting Brian to check her banking app. I filed paperwork to pause our shared business entity, locking down access to profits. Even the car, her precious white SUV, was leased under my business. One call, and the vehicle could be retrieved within 48 hours if needed. She was still living her fantasy, still dressing up for strategy meetings and kissing me goodbye like it was routine. I began recording phone calls, legal in our state with one-party consent. Not because I wanted to hear it all again, but to be ready if she ever tried to twist the narrative. By month's end, I had a legal folder so airtight, not even her new lover's slick words could loosen it. And I wasn't done. Next, I called her employer's HR office, not to blow the whistle, just to ask about spousal benefits. Innocent enough, but it laid groundwork. A week later, I had lunch with an old friend who just happened to know the owner of the firm where Brian worked. Small world, especially when your wife is dating a subordinate. Especially when company policy has very strict views on workplace relationships, especially ones that involve deception. I wasn't loud. I wasn't messy. I just made sure the walls were inching in around her, one silent block at a time. I knew the day was coming. The one where she'd think she was walking away from our marriage with some newfound love and freedom. But when she finally made that move, she'd find out she was walking into a hollow shell of her own making. It happened on a Thursday. She came home early, wearing a dress I hadn't seen in years. Hair done, nails fresh, heels clicking across the kitchen floor like punctuation marks. She sat across from me at the table and folded her hands. No es mal, no es paligi. Just a tilt of her head and a rehearsed calm. I think we need to talk. I nodded. Sure. She launched into a monologue. How she'd been unhappy, how people change, how she'd finally found someone who understood her. She said she didn't want drama, that she hoped we could be civil, that she'd like to keep the house, at least until things settle. Her voice stayed level, but I could hear the tension beneath it. She was nervous, but she thought she was holding the cards. I let her finish. Then I stood, walked to the desk drawer, and slid a folder across the table. Inside, the banking records, the hotel receipts, printouts of her messages to Brian, and copies of property deeds with her name missing from everyone. Her hand froze over the pages. I said nothing. She flipped through it slowly. When she looked up, her face was stripped of the smug calm she came in with. I've known for a while, I said, my voice low. I didn't say anything because I wanted you to show me exactly who you were before you walked away. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I kept going. You won't get the house. The cars are mine. The business account is locked. And Brian, I paused. You might want to ask him why HR has him on leave. That one landed. Her face drained. What did you do? Nothing illegal, I said. But enough. She stood abruptly. You think you've won? No, I said, walking past her. I think I finally stopped losing. She moved out 2 days later. Took some clothes, some framed photos, and her worn-out justifications. Tried to reach out a few times after that. Not to apologize, just to spin the story, soften the fall. But by then, I was done being her cushion. Brian vanished not long after, jobless and apparently blindsided by the fallout. She found herself suddenly untethered, floating in a world she thought would catch her. But it didn't, because I was the one holding everything up all along. And I'd let go. There's a kind of silence that feels like a fresh coat of paint. Clean. New. That's what the house felt like after she left. I replaced the living room curtains, boxed up the old wine glasses she loved, and tore down the gallery wall of family photos. Not out of spite, just necessity. The past no longer had a seat in this house. I wasn't trying to forget her. I was trying to remember myself. I took time off work, not because I was broken, but because I could. I'd spent so many years building something for both of us. It felt good to sit back and finally enjoy what I'd created. I had lunch with friends I hadn't seen in months. Started running again. Signed up for cooking class. Little things. Quiet joys. Each one a small reminder that she didn't take the best parts of me. She just stopped seeing them. I never went public with the affair. I didn't have to. Word got around the moment Brian's suspension hit the office grapevine. Diane had to explain her new living arrangement to her friends, but by then, they'd heard enough whispers. The invitations stopped coming. Her old circles faded. And when she finally reached out, weeks later, it wasn't to reconcile. It was to ask for help. Her voice cracked when she said it. I didn't think it would be like this. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't mock her. I just said, neither did I. Then I hung up. She called again. I didn't answer. She emailed. I didn't reply. Not out of vengeance. Just closure. I'd already given her enough of my life. Now I was reclaiming it. Funny thing? My kids were more present than ever. My daughter came home just to cook dinner with me one night. My son, who used to avoid phone calls, now calls me every Sunday without fail. They saw the whole thing unfold, not through gossip, but through how I handled it. They saw what dignity looks like in a storm. And I'll tell you something I never thought I'd say. I'm grateful. Not for the pain, but for the clarity it brought. Diane cheated, yes. But that wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of mine. If you stayed until the end, thank you. These stories are more than entertainment. They're lived experience, shared so we can all feel a little less alone. If this one struck a chord, hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe for more. I see you, and I appreciate you.